Conservative. Constitutional. It's the Andrew Cooperrider Show, keeping you informed on what's going on right here in Kentucky.
And you're back here today. What a wonderful Friday here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. For those of you watching, of course, on Twitter, on Facebook, on YouTube, and all those other places, 2 days in a row now we've done a video episode. Yesterday, I was with Nick Nash and Chris Wiest. Today, they're with me again. We actually filmed this on the same day, just full disclosure. So when you see that Nick and Chris are wearing the same things, it's not like they don't do their laundry. So anyways, so this is our second episode where we're going through making some picks on some key races today. We know we're going to cover House District 64. We know we're going to cover Senate District 7. We know we're going to cover House District 45, talking about those races, making predictions. We'll also probably end up discussing a few other races. Before I dig down into it, if you want to know more background on Nick Nash and Chris Wiest, I encourage you to go back and listen to yesterday's episode. We started off talking about that. I don't want to burn a bunch of people's times talking about it again, but you can head on over to theandrewshow.com to check out old episodes. And in case you missed one, and then in case you missed it yesterday, announcement starting Monday, the first Monday in June, at 11 o'clock on WBNA 21. I will be on TV in Louisville each and every Monday. For an hour, starting at 11, you'll be able to catch the Andrew Cooperrider Show there in Louisville, brought to you by Kentucky's Voice. So, without further ado, let's dig down into it. So we're talking about House District 64. That is Kim Mosier being taken on by Karen Campbell. Kim Mosier has raised $153,000 herself. She's had only independent expenditures up until 2 weeks out of $2,500. Now, we do know there's been a PAC that's dedicated $35,000 to Kim Mosier, coming from, funny enough, the Trans Safe Action Network has committed $35,000 to that race, which tells you how it's going. And then you have Karen Campbell. She has raised $12,000, has independent expenditures only of 14 2 weeks out, but there's few more coming in. But most interestingly, Make Liberty Win, based upon their independent expenditures, it does appear they are knocking the district for Karen Campbell. That is an X factor to talk about. I think, I'll start off here on this race. So I think nobody, including myself, and, full disclosure, I spoke at a Karen Campbell fundraiser too as well in Northern Kentucky, and I did not expect this race to be this race. I actually didn't expect it to be all that competitive. I know we see Northern Kentucky. We see that Northern Kentucky has a weird thing going on. There's a lot more Liberty grassroots active members that are willing to go out there. They're willing to hit doors. They're willing to make phone calls than you see in a lot of other places across the state. I do understand that. But what I thought would be more difficult in this race is explaining what certificate of need is and why it's a problem. However, I think because Proctor over the last 2 years has made such a big deal about it, and then we see, the newspapers, Lincoln, KY, we see Cincinnati Enquirer, we've seen a lot of other media covering what certificate of need is and how it affects healthcare in Northern Kentucky. It's not as hard for people to grasp the concept that it's bad. And I think that's a factor here in this election, because when you're looking at Kim Mosier, she is the kind of the pro-con, the hospital association representative in there, and really kind of standing in the way of some of the certificate of need moving forward. And for Northern Kentucky, where they only have St. East as the only hospital system in the area, that certainly is a big issue. Chris, you're from the area. What do you think?
There's a lot going on in this race, right? I mean, you mentioned St. E's and the chamber. They're playing heavy, I think, on the Kim Mosier side. I mean, she has raised a lot of money. Her husband, by the way, Neil, is a doctor with St. Elizabeth Physicians. So, literally very, very close to home. I think that's why she squelched certificate of need. The other thing that's going on in this race is, and I'm sure you know this, and when they did redistricting in 2021, they moved what was effectively a Democratic seat in Covington, which is, a Democratic area, that literally sits right next to the Ohio River. It's fairly urban, and they sort of split it up a little bit, sent some of it over to that Newport seat that Rachel Roberts held, sent some of it, kind of split it up. And as a consequence of that, the 65th, Stephanie Dietz picked up, areas of Fort Wright, which are more conservative in red, areas of Edgewood, which are more conservative in red. But to do that, they had to go and stretch the 64th in Independence, which is more of kind of a Liberty Republican area versus, kind of the more establishment areas of Edgewood. And I think so that you've got a demographic shift that probably works against Kim Mosier to some degree. You've got the Tea Party folks up here, which is still active. They've been knocking for 2.5 months. I agree with you. This was a sleeper. I didn't see this one coming. The people that I'm involved with didn't necessarily see this one coming, but it's been a sleeper. And C4CA, I think, has run 7 mailers. They've hit Mosier on the. She had that vote on, and this is why the trans pack is the transgender pack is coming in for her. She had that vote, where they were banning genital surgeries for minors, and Kim voted against it, and with the liberals, and she's getting pelted for that. And I think it's moving numbers. I would have said 3 weeks ago, Kim Mosier had this walking away. I don't say that right now. I actually think Karen Campbell's going to come out on top. It's going to be close, less than 1%, 51-49 for Karen Campbell Tuesday, and it's going to shock everybody. That's what I think is going to happen.
So I'm going to piggyback off of some things that you said, because the 64th district is very interesting. Brief background: Kim Mosier is chairwoman of the House Health Committee. Everything that you've said, about CON, that's in her purview. But talking about redistricting, those precincts up in Covington, those what we would call bluer areas, I think wind up helping in this race, and that Kim, who has faced tough races before and has taken these slings and arrows, and with all due respect, you guys saying that this wasn't on the radar, this was always on my radar because it's Northern Kentucky. Even though she is 100% in Campbell or in Kenton County, there were forces. From the day she won her last race, saying that they were going to come after Kim. So Kim was not caught off guard. Kim is very well suited for that district. It's a highly suburban district, very walkable. And Kim's been out there doing what she's continuously done since holding that seat. I agree with you. I think it's going to be closer. I think the outside money that has come in for her opponent is going to,
and how that's being spent on knocking too. I mean,
well, exactly. And there's a legitimate army of Northern Kentucky folks that are knocking on Kim Mosier's opponent's behalf. Would agree with you that it's close. I'm saying 53-47 Kim Mosier. There you go.
But if nobody has come in and it's just the Mosier campaign knocking doors, I can tell you, it's hard to get volunteers, one, especially when you're not the most necessarily inspirational candidate. Two, that leaves you with hiring door knockers, and it's hard to hire local door knockers. Now, if you don't go out and you don't hire a professional door knocking group, which honestly, I didn't look at the KRF. I don't know if Kim Mosier does, but I'm indicated to believe that Kim Mosier is not hitting as many doors as Karen Campbell. That is the Cincinnati media market. So those dollars aren't going to go as far. Even though she has a pretty good fundraising advantage. On top of that, her Neanderthals comment, when, the gender transition surgeries and calling everybody Neanderthals for wanting to get rid of chopping off the genitalia of minors, that really resonated and stuck to the district too. So I'm going to give it to Karen Campbell. I never thought I would be saying that. If you had asked me 2 months ago, I wouldn't be saying this, but I'm going to give it to Karen Campbell. I think she'll crack 51%. I don't think she'll go over 52. So Karen Campbell, 51-49. I think it will be the upset race, the Sal Santoro race of 2022, I think is what the Karen Campbell, Kim Mosier race will be in 2024. That's my thoughts. We're coming up on a break, so we'll be back in a few short minutes. We'll be talking about Senate District 7. Very interesting race. We'll have that after this short break. And you're back here at the Andrew Cooperrider Show, joined by Nick Nash and Chris Wiest. We're discussing some races going on around the State, making our picks, making our predictions, and the next race up, Senate District 7, we've got Adrian Southworth, the incumbent, having raised $56,000, has $56,000 in independent expenditures coming in from Make Liberty Win, which is knocking doors for her. You have Aaron Reed. He has raised $132,000. He is a former Navy SEAL and gun shop owner. That is important to mention in this race. Independent expenditures of $68,000 coming in from AFP, funny enough, and they are paying for people to hit doors there. They're knocking. And then Edward Gallerin, he's brought in $181,000. He's also a former Navy SEAL, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
And then independent expenditures, question mark. But we know for a fact that the Senate Republican Caucus Campaign Committee has sent mailers for Ed in this race. And so there has been some outside money we know for a fact spent. I don't know if people are knocking in the district or not. Who wants to go first on this one? Chris, Nick?
I'm happy. I found this race to be the most interesting of this entire cycle because you've got three people that are all kind of dipping into each other's groups. Like you said, Aaron Reed, Ed Galrine, both Navy SEALs. You have Adrian and Aaron who are both kind of tapping into some liberty movement things. So there's a whole dynamic. The district is Henry County, Shelby County, Anderson County, and then hooks into Jefferson County, into J-Town. Ed Galrine, Aaron Reed, both from Shelby County, Adrian Southworth from Anderson County. Full disclosure, I live in Woodford County. I lived in Woodford County when Adrian was running in a 5-6-way race back in 2020 during COVID, and she won that race. Nobody really expected that. And so my point in all this rambling is that I don't underestimate Adrian Southworth. I think that Ed and Aaron are going to split some votes because they're similar, and Adrian's been able to kind of graze a path moving forward. I know that it would make Michael Adams' day if Adrian Southworth lost, but she's got a following. She is pretty deliberative in her actions, and the fact that she's raised the money that she has raised has shocked me. And I've talked to people in Shelby, Anderson, Henry County that have been getting their doors knocked by all three campaigns, and there's going to be a real choice here. So I think that if this was head-to-head, maybe Adrian would be in more trouble. But because of this three-way race, I think Adrian is probably, somewhere at the 45% mark, and then the other ones are below her. I think you're in the 30s for both of them.
Chris, what are you thinking?
Aaron's got deep roots to Shelby County. His dad was a law enforcement, has deep ties in the law enforcement community in Shelby County. Aaron's had Second Amendment groups. Adrian's got incumbency. Adrian's got, Make Liberty Win out there working for her. Ed Galrine's got more of the establishment, obviously the Senate. We talked about this, the Senate Campaign Committee. This is tough. Let me say this, first of all. Anybody that tells you that they have a prediction in this race is probably wrong. I'm just being serious. This is one I just cannot put my finger on it. I mean, there's just so many factors in this. I don't even want to make a prediction in it because. Well,
you shouldn't have came on the show. I told you what races we were doing.
This one is so tough. I mean, it really is tough. I think, Southworth's probably, 35, probably. Reed's probably in that 35. Galrine's probably in that 30. And that's where I'm at. And I think this is going to be a race that's decided by less than 500 votes.
So I think it's a close race. You've got all of them knocking doors. I do think it's interesting, just for sheer tactical side of thing, that AFP, Americans for Prosperity Action, decided to get as involved in this race as they did. And I'm only saying that because, generally speaking, Americans for Prosperity finds a lot of common cause with more so the liberty side of things. They're not always on our side, but they're with us probably 90% of the time on the conservative liberty side. And by getting involved in this race, the question is, does it turn off a lot of people? And when I'm looking at this race, and I'm talking from the liberty side of things, because to your point, both Southworth and Reed are dipping into this. I mean, and full disclosure, I've known Southworth for years. Me and her text all the time. At the same time, I know Reed really well. I bought my AR-10 from him. Like literally, we texted across each other to make the deal. So, and I want to reiterate that as we're talking about these races, we are trying to be scientific. None of these are endorsements. We're not saying who we want to win. Make that clear. But if it was Aaron Reed versus Adrian Southworth, I do think Aaron Reed would win. Because Aaron Reed naturally is just somebody that if you know nothing, you want to vote for. I mean, former Navy SEAL, younger though still. He doesn't look like an older guy like Ed is. Not saying anything bad about Ed's age, but he's a younger guy, charismatic. He's a big presence, gun store owner, farmer. I mean, literally, there isn't a topic where any baseline conservative voters looking at that saying, yeah, that is somebody I want. That is who I would automatically vote for. The problem is everything about him that makes him attractive for people to vote for in that election has now been dipped into by other people. His more slight conservative liberty side leanings, you have Southworth. Now, the argument Reed makes here is that he's going to be more effective than Southworth is. And because Southworth hasn't been doing a good job of getting leadership in line with her. The problem is when who you're talking to that really cares about that nitty gritty as much about it, you're going to be talking to either the establishment that has Ed, or you're talking to the more liberty-based crowd who has Southworth. And personally, and this has been a discussion I've had with many people about this election, as I've myself been trying to feel it out, is do you turn in somebody that, doesn't quote unquote get along with leadership, that some people, not saying I do, but some people describe as a little more farther to the right, but votes exactly how you want them to every time, that is a good voting record, for somebody that says that they will be a good voting record, but will be an upgrade on the more personal standpoint of things, but that's an unknown. And I think the liberty conservative side will lean towards Southworth, because the argument that vote for me, she doesn't get along well with leadership. Well, we kind of sort of don't want you to get along well with leadership. I mean, literally it's a point of honor that several of our people got kicked off committees, in 2023. And so I think that plays into this race as well. So Reed versus Southworth, I think Reed wins, but Ed's got the Navy SEAL thing. Ed's in Shelby County, the biggest county in the district. That takes away some of Aaron's votes. And I think that Ed also, because the establishment more so side, that 20% or so of the electorate, I call the McConnell voters, the people that love McConnell when you knock on their door. Anybody who knocks doors knows what I'm talking about. They're going to fall towards Ed when normally they would have fell towards Reed. And I think Ed being in the race only helps Southworth stand, and makes you wonder then why the SRCCC dumped money behind Ed. If their goal was to get rid of Southworth, why are they bringing in a candidate and paying them big to literally only help Southworth, I think, stay in? That becomes the question I now have. With that being stated, I think Southworth is going to win. I think she's like maybe 38%. I think Southworth wins with 38%. I think Reed comes in second at 35, 36. And I think Ed ends up at whatever is left. I don't know what it's left. I'm not going to do the math and embarrass myself, but Ed gets whatever's left.
And to just do the history lesson, Aaron Reed has been running since 2022.
He's been running for 4
years. Kind of in a situation with you, Coop, that he announced he was running for a seat, then redistricting came, and then all of a sudden he was in a completely different seat. And, so he's had this apparatus. I completely agree with you. I think this has been a great spirited debate. The Shelby County Farm Bureau put on a debate between the three of them, and this has been actually a phenomenal race to look at. I just think that Shelby County being at the heart of it, being the majority of the chunk, you split that up. I think Adrian, who has run in crowded primaries before and knows how to get her chunk and to run away with it, has shaped up to be. Chris, I agree with you. I think this is a race that you could potentially be waking up on Wednesday finding out the results.
So what do you think?
My prediction?
Percentages.
So I think Adrian is.
You may have already said it.
Yeah, so 45 for Adrian, and then Ed and Aaron in the 30s.
In the 30s,
yeah.
But you won't name a percentage for those two.
Let's put them. Put my math skills to the test. Let's put Ed at 33, and then give Aaron Reed 35.
Okay.
And then whatever's left, if there's anything, then give it to one of them.
Chris, what do you think? I don't think your math works, but Go ahead, Chris. What do you think?
No, I said 35, 35, 30, and I will say this: I think Reed gets the lion's share of the votes in Shelby. I do. I think he gets more votes than Adrian and Ed, but maybe not Adrian and Ed combined. And I mean, Adrian's probably going to win Anderson. I'm where I was before, 35, 35, 30. And I think it's less than a couple hundred votes.
Okay. Well, we're coming up on a break. After this, we'll be talking about House District 45 between Killeen Timoney and Thomas Jefferson. We'll have that after this short break. And you're back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show. We're sitting down here with Nick Nash, Chris Wiest. We've been talking elections. And now we have House District 45, which is Killeen Timoney being challenged by Thomas Jefferson. Now, as far as fundraising goes, we don't actually know how much Timoney has raised for this race. For some reason, he either hasn't filed a report to KREF, or KREF, for some reason, on probably the highest spending race in the House, isn't working to show us how much. I logged in this morning. I did see we had a report that he filed at the end of the year that was $30,000. I think there's been a lot more probably he's raised than that. Yeah. And then, so I would say it wouldn't be extreme at all to say he's raised 150K easy into this election. And then independent expenditures, he's got $255,000 so far in independent expenditures that has been spent before this came out, before these 2 weeks. And then Thomas Jefferson, he's got $14,225. He's raised independent expenditures, $37,000. This is interesting. Something I'm going to return to in our conversation personally. Make Liberty win, though they're spending money in this race. According to the IEs I've seen, the independent expenditure reports, they are not knocking in this race.
This is a highly knockable district.
Very highly knockable district. I'll return to this discussion here in a second. Chris, you want to start us off?
So this race has Jessamine County GOP, and put out, and this is what Boone County did recently in some of the Northern Kentucky races, put out basically a condemnation of Killeen Timoney, saying he's not a Republican, right? And, that when you have a party apparatus sort of playing in a race, I think that's a factor. A lot of money coming in for Killeen, but there's money going the other way too. I actually think Thomas Jefferson ends up winning this 52-48.
I don't know who's exactly making the decisions for Make Liberty Win, but I would literally swap the support they've given to Savannah Maddox in her race for the support they've given to Thomas Jefferson. Just even swap them. And I think Savannah Maddox, I don't think, is in much trouble. And she would be fine with just the few mailers, 5, 6, 7 mailers sent. I understand you need to protect your people, but I don't think she's in trouble. But they're knocking Savannah Maddox's race, according to independent expenditures that's been booked, but not knocking Thomas Jefferson's race. I have felt less confident as I discovered that. And I think they will be able to cover the district once. But Killeen Timoney has people out knocking for him, professional knockers out knocking. How effective are they going to be? So this race really comes down to me to, is this a Liz Cheney moment? That's what I've been calling this race. Is this a Liz Cheney moment? Because we saw Liz Cheney lose in Wyoming. No matter how much, it didn't matter. You could literally spend $1 billion on Liz Cheney's congressional reelection campaign, everybody knew her voting record, her public statement history, her stances on Trump, all these things. She was never going to win that election. Everybody knew, right? Is this a Liz Cheney, Ed Massey kind of thing where everybody knows in the district that Killian Timoney has a awful voting record? And is there an amount of money that you can spend to run away from that horrible voting record?
House District 45, you keep saying horrible voting record, horrible voting record, horrible voting record. There are two forms of representation. People can believe that when they're elected, my community members elected me, so I'm going to vote the way that I believe. Then there are other elected officials that vote the way that the district, is made up. I think the 45th is a blue district, even though it reaches into.
I think it used to be. No, I don't think it is anymore.
No, I think it's it is Fayette.
It's competitive.
It is 80% Fayette County.
It is.
Fayette County voted 77% for Andy Beshear. Daniel Cameron didn't win a single precinct in Fayette County.
Right, but we are talking about a Republican primary.
No, I agree, but I think he fits the district, and he hasn't run away from his votes. I know that people have challenged him through Facebook posts on the doorsteps, and he has had those conversations with the voters about where he's voted. The amount of money that has been thrown in this race is absolutely ridiculous. This will be the highest spending one, obviously, with it being Fayette County media market. But I think Killian has been working it and has covered the district. I think what's going to be interesting is turnout and how much, because I think Thomas Jefferson's strength comes from Jessamine County. Mm-hmm. And how much, because it pierces even down into a little bit of Wilmore. That's how far down it goes.
Right.
And so if they're able to galvanize that base, then I think it could be interesting.
Well, and I think to your point, though, do you think if I polled that district, they would be okay with transition surgery for minors? I know what the data says nationwide. I know what the data says by party. Not even the majority of Democrats are okay with gender transition surgeries on minors. They're not. Mm-hmm. And then you go into school choice. Do you think the majority of that district is for or against school choice?
When you say district, I mean, you're talking about a Republican primary. And the other point that I would make is this was a district that was previously held before Killian Timoney by one of the most conservative members of the House Republican caucus, Stan Lee. I don't believe that this district is like super purple. I mean, generally with Republican voters or Republican primary voters, I don't think that it's sort of moderates. There's no way Stan Lee would be able to hold that district as long as he did. I understand redistricting, 21 redistricting, but I just,
it only was made more conservative with redistricting in 21.
I think Fayette County, with it still being 80% Fayette County, and Fayette County has seen a very large lurch to the left. And even those Republican precincts, you're 100% right. Stan Lee was the backbone of conservative issues and having that Fayette County seat, but that seat has changed rapidly as we see a national realignment. And so, what I'm saying is that Killian, as a former coach and as a teacher, he has explained his votes. He didn't shock people. He came out publicly and made these and very much made statements on how he voted. And in 2022, he didn't even have a race. He didn't have a primary or a general.
He had no primary when he first ran.
Well, Stan Lee, but then Stan Lee dropped out.
Right. So there was never a time where a primary voter has voted for Killian Timoney. There's a good possibility that not a single person who's voting in this primary has ever actually checkmarked the box next to Killian Timoney's name. They went in, they walked in, they voted straight ticket, they walked out. Because most Republican primary voters vote straight ticket. I don't know the percentages, but they do vote straight ticket. So with that being said, Chris, you're at, what were you, 52-48 for Thomas Jefferson?
Yes.
For me, it'll either be, I think it's going to either be a blowout in either direction, one way or the other, because it's either a Liz Cheney moment, and it does not matter how much money you spend. I understand you're saying he's come out, he hasn't ran away from his votes. He's tried to explain them. His explanations have been lackluster, in my opinion. Just outside looking in.
And you know that district better than I do.
Yeah. Well, and I'm just looking at the fact that, he comes out and he says, "Oh, I voted to allow parents to chop off the genitalia of minors because I thought it was a parents' rights issue." But then he turns around and says that when you send your kids to public school, you don't have a right anymore to your kid. That doesn't make sense. That's not a principle. So anyways, I think it'll be a blowout in either direction. I guess blowout's relative, but I think it would be 58-42 for Thomas Jefferson. I'm going to be honest. I felt a little more uncomfortable recently. I'm actually knocking Sunday for this race. So I'll get a better feel. There's a part of me that says I should say the same exact thing, but for Timoney, but I'll knock it in for Thomas Jefferson. Nick?
Well, and I'll make a brief caveat. What a great name and benefit that Thomas Jefferson has that we haven't discussed, but just like you said, they're going to be fresh people that haven't voted in a 45th district primary before, and they're going to see Thomas Jefferson on the race. I think there's been a lot of money spent. I don't think there's going to be a lot of low educated voters just with how bad turnout's going to be and everything. So I think that's why this is going to be a close race, or that's one of the factors of why this is going to be a close race. But I'm saying 52-48, Killian.
Okay. Well, coming up after this, we're going to go through a few other rapid fire, kind of talking about a few other races. Stay with us. And you're back with the Andrew Cooperrider Show. If you've been listening to the last 2 days, we've been making some predictions with Nick Nash, Chris Wiest. Hopefully you guys think we've put together a good group of people to kind of give you different viewpoints on a few different things. We've been making some predictions. Once again, reminder to everybody, predictions do not mean endorsements. Just because we made a prediction doesn't mean we're endorsing you. It also doesn't mean we want you to win necessarily. Chris, Nick, you want to pick a race first and talk about it?
Yeah, I mean, let me talk about all of the Boone County House District races, which is the Proctor-Pavis race, the Roberts-Massey race. There's also a Senate race. I think it's Rawlings and Dwayne. I'll remember the Senate race.
Not going to win. No, I'm just kidding.
Dwayne's not going to win. But what's interesting is, right, the Boone County GOP put out a mailer, and there's all this like controversy up here in Northern Kentucky right now, where they basically went out and they endorsed the entire Liberty slate in this mailer, and people are just really hot, especially like the judge executive in Boone County, Gary Moore. Well, he's up next cycle, and he's worried about it being done to him, and so I mean, there's all this controversy up here. The Ed Massey, DJ Roberts race has been absolutely gutter, sort of nasty, mostly on Ed's part, I think.
Yeah, Ed's really been immature. He was like in a candidate. I missed this. He was in a candidate forum, and he was wrapping up, and he said, my opponent allegedly had a Grindr account, and then asked for proof for this from the Cincinnati Enquirer that wrote a huge article about it. He's like, I just heard it somewhere. And so it's like, you're just like, yeah, somebody told me one time that some guy was gay, so I'm going to make that claim now. Like,
so his source was Eric Peters, who just got popped by Congressman Massey. He's running against Congressman Massey, and Congressman just put out a mailer about Eric's, extensive criminal record and arrests and everything. And like, that's your source of information. This guy, the Kentucky Supreme Court, is like refused to give a law license back to because of multiple acts of dishonesty. And like, that's your source. I mean, it's just the race is insane.
No, but Chris, that's a great point. I think Boone County is a hotbed right now of a bunch of races. I mean, I think everyone but Kim Banta up there has a primary, right?
Yep.
Yeah. But I think another interesting race. I know, Andrew, you've covered it before, but I think House District 91, Estill, Powell, and just a sliver of Madison. That's incumbent Bill Wesley versus Daryl Billings, who is a figure in that community. Daryl ran 2 years ago, got blown out, came back, is running a different race, and I think making an actual case for a district. And Daryl's whole point has been, I can be more effective in Frankfort. This district cannot have somebody at the helm who isn't putting its needs first. And that's the case he's making. And then you've had Bill Wesley, who has been pushing back. And might I just say, Bill is a fierce campaigner. He wears out multiple pairs of shoes every single cycle, knocking on doors. But I think Daryl's got enough of a fixture there to where this race is going to be really interesting, and one that is very high on my radar come Tuesday.
Well, and I think too in that race, it is interesting because you have Daryl, who he's definitely kind of I'd call him a good old boy politics figure. I mean, he's kind of played the Democrat side, the Republican side, focusing more on personal relationships, that kind of retail politics side of things, then focusing more so on principles on the major things, basically the mindset of right, wrong, or indifferent, of government should, quote unquote, work for my community, kind of type of thing. The person who says that their job going to Frankfurt is to bring back as much dough as they can for their district, and whatever votes they need to take to make that happen, that's their goal. Bring back as much as I can for my district. And that can be an asset. And I've said this before on the show, if that's what you want in a representative, then that's what you want in a representative. And maybe choosing some of these more liberty people who are fighting, conservative, whatever you want to call them, that are fighting on a set of conservative values and principles, but in that process, because everything is more black and white, I guess you'd call it, they're less willing to make deals on hard votes. They're not bringing back as much cheddar into their districts. They're not going to get those special projects paid for by the state.
That district literally has schools that are crumbling.
Right. I get
it. We've talked about it before on this show, localizing races. When it's hard to differentiate between two Republicans running in a race, when you can localize an issue, when you can make something hyper-focused, that starts breaking through the noise. And last time, Daryl Billings did not break through the noise, got trounced. This time, he's breaking through the noise. Is it enough to get through this primary? I don't know, but I'm just saying this is one.
Well, in 22 and 23, he also lined up a lot more support for himself. Daryl Billings did. Coming into this primary, working with Comer on helping get some of the Democrats, going to the Democrats to represent Comer, because where Billings comes from, the Democrat Party side of things. Working with Shell came in and endorsed him. Mark Metcalf came in and endorsed him because he did work for them in that district. So he has been amassing some support from.
But didn't Bill Wesley work for Kelly Craft on
Bill
her race?
Wesley worked for Kelly Craft. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
I mean-
No, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with Daryl Billings having worked on these races. I'm just saying it's smart of him to have gathered that support. Chris?
Yeah, and Andy Barr and Jimmy Comer are obviously all in on Billings. And, that's a really interesting race, I think. It's just an interesting race. And Billings is one of those guys that was this longtime Democrat, and now, he's crossed over. You've seen a lot of that, frankly, in some of the more rural districts.
Well, I mean, you're seeing that too in Northern Kentucky. Chris Pavase, former Democrat, right?
Yeah, like former, it was like a year and a half ago, like in California, but yes.
Senate District, Thayer's old seat, was that 19? What district is that?
17.
17? Senate District 17. Matt Nunn was a Democrat. And then he, in 2017, I think, and then he switched over to an independent. He only switched to a Republican a few years ago in order to vote for his wife in a primary. And so at least that's, I've seen the open records request on his filing. So those dates fall in line. His reason for switching to Republican is just quote unquote hearsay, right? Like I've just told that, but that makes sense, and it's funny too. And I mentioned this on my show that a lot of these people that you're seeing, Andy Stone has donated to a Democrat before. A lot of these candidates that we see the more establishment supporting have ties to the Democrat Party. And I think that's fascinating when we hear people like Thayer, like Trey Watson, who's running one of these PACs, like Don Parkinson, go out there, who's running one of these PACs, go out there and talk about why they're doing this and saying, we're here to defend the true Republicans, the real Republican Party, real conservative party. But yet, when you look at every one of their candidates, they have some ties to the Democrat Party.
I think as much as you're saying that there's every race has a tie to a Democrat, I think on C4, forgive me for it, but I think that was back to my flair of you see a libertarian flair to it. So I mean,
but you're only seeing one of their candidates that they've been involved with that was actually registered as a libertarian.
Well, I'm just saying I think what the point is that there is a battle, like Chris said, for the heart and soul of this party.
Yeah.
And it's on both sides. And these races, I think this year is going to be a catalyst that Kentucky House and Senate races are going to continue to get nasty as they are continuously more and more decided in the primary.
Michael Meredith race versus Kelsey Rock is nasty and dirty.
But here's the thing about that race, going back to local issues. Edmonson County has a wet, dry vote. Michael Meredith is Edmonson County born, raised champion. That race, it's got nasty. There's been a lot of money, but I think Michael walks away with that one.
You think Michael walks away with that one?
I do.
Chris, what do you think about that race?
I think that race is much closer than Nick makes out. I don't know right now because of there's just so much going back and forth. They brought up, Michael's deal with the intern during the Hoover days. I mean, there's been mail on that. There's just been, and then they hit Kelsey on some stuff. It just, Kelsey on the child support thing. I think Kelsey had some kind of judgment thing where he just got hit for. So, I mean, there's just, and then the allegation back from Kelsey was Michael Meredith's wife's the child support person and nobody else who misses a payment gets whacked. And so she's misusing her office. There's just all this stuff in that race. I
don't think Meredith runs away with it. I think it'll be close. I think it could go either way, though. But, well, I think that's all we have time for today. Thank you, Chris and Nick, for joining us. Thank you all for joining us. We'll see you back here Monday. Remember, if you want to get out there, vote. Make sure you're voting. If you're informed, if you're not informed, stay home. I don't want you voting. And volunteer work. I'm just being honest. Volunteer work on campaigns for whoever you like. Go out there, knock doors this weekend. They could use your help. You guys have a great day. We'll be seeing you.